In this gripping tale of political drama and unexpected alliances, we'll take you through the protest scene, the mounting tensions upon Trump's arrival, and the shocking twist that unfolded when a group of bikers decided to take matters into their own hands. Buckle up as we dive into this extraordinary event that left both sides stunned and the nation talking. Before we proceed with this tale, please tell us where you're tuning in from. If you like stories like this one, consider subscribing to the channel as we have another unique story lined up for you tomorrow. Picture this: a sea of protesters, signs held high, voices echoing through the streets. The anticipation is palpable as they await the arrival of former President Donald Trump. Tensions are rising, and the atmosphere is electric with the promise of confrontation. But just as the scene seems set for chaos, an unexpected rumble breaks through the cacophony. Leather-clad figures astride roaring motorcycles emerge on the horizon. The protesters' chants falter, replaced by a mix of confusion and apprehension. What happens next will leave you speechless. The protest unfolded in the heart of Washington, D.C., a city no stranger to political demonstrations and public gatherings. The event took place on a crisp autumn morning, just days before a scheduled appearance by former President Donald Trump at a high-profile political rally. The timing was deliberate, chosen to coincide with the build-up to Trump's speech, ensuring maximum visibility and impact. The protesters had strategically selected the area surrounding the National Mall, a symbolic location that has witnessed countless historical moments and demonstrations throughout American history. This choice was not arbitrary. It represented a deliberate attempt to draw parallels between their cause and the great civil rights movements of the past. As dawn broke over the nation's capital, the first wave of demonstrators began to assemble. They gathered near the Washington Monument, its towering obelisk serving as a silent witness to the unfolding events. The early morning light cast long shadows across the mall, creating a dramatic backdrop for the day's proceedings. The protest location held additional significance due to its proximity to key government buildings. The White House, Capitol Hill, and various federal agencies were all within sight, serving as constant reminders of the power structures the protesters sought to challenge. This geographical context added weight to their message, as every chant and raised placard seemed to echo off the marble facades of these institutions. The motivations driving the protesters were as diverse as the crowd itself, yet united by a common thread of opposition to former President Trump and his policies. Many demonstrators voiced concerns about the potential impact of Trump's influence on future elections, citing fears of democratic erosion and the spread of misinformation. One of the primary demands echoing through the crowd was a call for electoral reform. Protesters brandished signs demanding increased transparency in campaign financing, stricter regulations on political advertising, and measures to combat voter suppression. These demands reflected a deep-seated anxiety about the integrity of the American democratic process. Climate change emerged as another focal point of the protest. Many participants expressed frustration with what they perceived as Trump's dismissal of environmental concerns during his presidency. They called for immediate action on climate change, demanding that political leaders prioritize environmental protection and invest in renewable energy sources. The issue of social justice also featured prominently in the protesters' agenda. Demonstrators voiced their concerns about systemic racism, income inequality, and healthcare disparities. They demanded comprehensive police reform, increased funding for education in underserved communities, and the implementation of policies to address wealth inequality. Immigration reform was another key demand, with many protesters decrying what they saw as inhumane border policies implemented during Trump's administration. They called for a more compassionate approach to immigration, including a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants and the reunification of families separated at the border. The crowd also included advocates for LGBTQ+ rights, who expressed concern about potential rollbacks of protections for their community. They demanded legislation to safeguard LGBTQ+ rights and called for increased representation in government and public institutions. Healthcare was another significant issue driving the protesters. Many carried signs demanding universal healthcare coverage, lower prescription drug prices, and increased funding for medical research. They argued that access to quality healthcare should be a fundamental right, not a privilege based on wealth or employment status. Interestingly, the protest also attracted a number of disillusioned former Trump supporters. These individuals shared their personal stories of how they had come to change their views, adding a powerful narrative element to the demonstration. Their presence served as a testament to the shifting political landscape and the potential for change even among formerly staunch supporters. As the morning progressed, the atmosphere at the protest site began to intensify. What had started as a calm and orderly gathering was gradually transforming into a more charged environment. The air crackled with a palpable sense of anticipation and unease, as if everyone present could sense the potential for significant events to unfold. The growing crowd, now numbering in the thousands, created a sea of movement and color. Protest signs bobbed up and down, their messages competing for attention. Chants rose and fell in waves, sometimes in unison, other times in a cacophony of overlapping slogans. The diversity of the protesters was evident, with people of all ages, races, and backgrounds standing shoulder to shoulder in common cause. Law enforcement presence was visible, but not overwhelming in the early stages of the protest. Police officers stood at strategic points, their watchful eyes scanning the crowd. Their presence added an element of tension, a reminder of the potential for conflict that often accompanies large-scale demonstrations. Media crews were out in force, their cameras and microphones capturing every moment. Reporters weaved through the crowd, seeking interviews and sound bites. The presence of the press added another layer of excitement and urgency to the proceedings, with many protesters eager to have their voices heard on a national stage. As news of the protest spread, counter-protesters began to arrive on the scene. Though smaller in number, their presence immediately raised the tension level. The two groups eyed each other warily across makeshift barriers, their competing chants creating a discordant symphony of political disagreement. The atmosphere was further charged by the knowledge that Trump supporters were expected to arrive in large numbers for the upcoming rally. This impending clash of ideologies hung over the protest like a storm cloud, with many wondering how the opposing groups would interact when they inevitably came face to face. Volunteers moved through the crowd, distributing water and snacks to protesters. These small acts of kindness and solidarity helped to maintain a sense of community amidst the growing tension. Impromptu speeches broke out at various points, with passionate individuals standing on benches or low walls to address those around them. As the morning wore on, the energy of the crowd seemed to ebb and flow. Moments of high emotion and loud chanting would be followed by periods of relative calm, where small groups engaged in earnest discussions about the issues at hand. This pattern created a sense of unpredictability, with no one quite sure when or how the next surge of energy would manifest. The initial peaceful nature of the protest was evident in the many families present, some with young children. Parents could be seen explaining the significance of the event to their kids, highlighting the educational aspect of civic engagement. However, as the crowd continued to grow and the atmosphere became more charged, some families began to retreat to the periphery, wary of potential escalation. Social media played a significant role in shaping the atmosphere of the protest. Many participants were actively posting updates, photos, and live streams, creating a real-time narrative that drew more people to the scene. This digital dimension added to the sense of immediacy and importance, with protesters aware that their actions were being broadcast to a global audience. As midday approached, there was a subtle shift in the air. Rumors began to circulate through the crowd about the imminent arrival of Trump supporters and potentially the former president himself. This information sent a ripple of anticipation through the gathering, causing people to cluster more tightly together and sparking intense discussions about how to respond. The protest organizers, recognizing the potential for conflict, began to move through the crowd, reminding people of the importance of remaining peaceful. They distributed flyers outlining protesters' rights and providing guidance on how to interact with law enforcement. These efforts to maintain order were met with mixed reactions, with some appreciating the guidance, while others chafed at what they perceived as attempts to control their expression. As the tension continued to build, small pockets of more aggressive behavior began to emerge. A few individuals, their faces obscured by bandanas, started to push against the police barriers. This action was quickly met with disapproval from the majority of protesters, who feared that such behavior would undermine their message and provide justification for a harsh response from law enforcement. The atmosphere was further complicated by the arrival of several high-profile political figures and celebrities who had come to show their support for the protest. Their presence drew cheers from the crowd, but also created logistical challenges as people surged forward to catch a glimpse or snap a photo. The organizers struggled to maintain order and keep the focus on the protest message rather than on the star power of these new arrivals. As the morning gave way to early afternoon, the initial atmosphere of determined but peaceful protest had evolved into a more complex and potentially volatile situation. The air was thick with tension, anticipation, and the competing emotions of thousands of individuals united in purpose, but uncertain about what the coming hours would bring. The stage was set for a confrontation between two deeply opposed ideological camps. The protesters, having made their presence and intentions known, now waited with a mixture of apprehension and resolve for the arrival of Trump and his supporters. The initial scene-setting phase of the protest was drawing to a close, and all eyes turned towards the horizon, wondering what dramatic events the day might yet hold. As President Trump's motorcade approached the venue, an intricate web of security measures was already in place, meticulously planned and executed by a coordinated team of law enforcement agencies. The United States Secret Service, local police departments, and specialized security units worked in tandem to create a robust protective barrier around the president and the event location. The perimeter of the venue was secured with a combination of physical barriers and strategically positioned personnel. Heavy-duty steel barricades lined the streets, creating a clear demarcation between authorized areas and spaces designated for protesters. These barriers were reinforced by a visible presence of uniformed officers who maintained a watchful eye on the growing crowds. In the air, helicopters from various law enforcement agencies circled overhead, providing real-time aerial surveillance and intelligence to ground teams. This bird's-eye view allowed security personnel to monitor crowd movements, identify potential threats, and coordinate responses swiftly and effectively. Sniper teams were discreetly positioned on nearby rooftops, their presence barely noticeable to the untrained eye. These highly skilled marksmen served as an additional layer of protection, ready to neutralize any immediate threats to the president's safety. Bomb-sniffing dogs and their handlers patrolled the area, methodically checking vehicles, packages, and suspicious objects for potential explosives. This canine presence not only served a practical purpose, but also acted as a visible deterrent to anyone considering harmful actions. Undercover agents, dressed in plain clothes, blended seamlessly with the crowd. These trained professionals were tasked with gathering intelligence, identifying potential troublemakers, and providing an inconspicuous layer of security within the masses. Advanced technology played a crucial role in the security apparatus. Facial recognition software, integrated with a network of high-definition cameras, scanned the crowds for known threats or individuals on watch lists. Mobile command centers, equipped with state-of-the-art communication systems, allowed for real-time information sharing and coordination between different security agencies. The Secret Service had also implemented a series of rolling road closures along the president's route, minimizing the risk of unexpected encounters or potential security breaches. These closures were carefully timed to balance the need for security with the desire to minimize disruption to local traffic and businesses. In preparation for any medical emergencies, several ambulances and medical teams were stationed at strategic locations around the venue. These first responders were ready to provide immediate assistance if needed, ensuring that any potential health issues could be addressed promptly. As an additional precaution, local authorities had implemented a temporary no-fly zone over the area, restricting unauthorized aircraft and drones from entering the airspace. This measure was designed to prevent aerial threats and ensure the safety of the president and attendees. The announcement of President Trump's imminent arrival sent a palpable wave of energy through the gathered protesters. The once simmering crowd now began to boil with a mix of emotions, ranging from anger and frustration to determination and resolve. Chants that had been sporadic and disjointed suddenly unified, growing louder and more rhythmic as the protesters found their collective voice. "Not my president," and "Resist," echoed through the streets, the volume increasing with each passing moment. Homemade signs and banners, which had been resting at the protesters' sides, were now hoisted high into the air. These visual displays of dissent range from clever political puns to stark, bold statements of opposition to Trump's policies and persona. As the reality of Trump's presence sank in, the crowd's composition began to shift. Those who had been casually observing from the sidelines now felt compelled to join the main body of protesters. The ranks swelled, creating a sea of bodies that stretched as far as the eye could see. This visual representation of opposition seemed to embolden the protesters further, their voices growing even louder in response. Some protesters began to push against the barricades, testing the limits of the security perimeter. Law enforcement officers, who had maintained a stoic presence until now, tensed visibly. Their hands moved to their belts, ready to respond if the situation escalated further. This dance of tension between protesters and police added another layer of drama to the unfolding scene. Amid the general chaos, smaller groups of protesters began to organize impromptu speeches and rallies within the larger crowd. Makeshift podiums were created from overturned crates and stepladders, allowing impassioned individuals to address their fellow demonstrators. These speakers, ranging from local activists to concerned citizens, shared personal stories of how they believed Trump's policies had negatively impacted their lives or the lives of their loved ones. The diversity of the protests became increasingly apparent as Trump's arrival drew nearer. People from all walks of life, young students, middle-aged professionals, retirees, and families with children, stood shoulder to shoulder in opposition. This melting pot of demographics served as a powerful visual reminder of the broad-based nature of the resistance to Trump's presidency. As tensions continued to rise, a small group of counter-protesters emerged, voicing their support for the president. Their presence, though vastly outnumbered, created pockets of heated verbal exchanges within the crowd. Security personnel quickly moved to create buffer zones between opposing groups, preventing physical confrontations, but unable to quell the passionate debates that erupted. The anticipation of Trump's arrival also brought out more creative forms of protest. Some demonstrators engaged in street theater, mimicking and mocking the president's mannerisms and speech patterns. Others employed art as a form of resistance, creating elaborate installations or performance pieces that critiqued Trump's policies and character. Social media played a significant role in the protesters' reactions. Many attendees live-streamed the event, sharing real-time updates and personal commentary with audiences around the world. Hashtags related to the protest trended rapidly, drawing even more attention to the unfolding events and potentially inspiring others to join the demonstration. As the moment of Trump's arrival drew ever closer, the energy of the crowd seemed to coalesce into a singular, focused intensity. The disparate voices of thousands of individuals merged into a thunderous roar of dissent, a sonic wall that seemed to physically push against the approaching presidential motorcade. As the confrontation between protesters and the impending arrival of President Trump intensified, media outlets from across the spectrum descended upon the scene, transforming the event into a national spectacle. News vans with towering satellite dishes lined the streets, their logos a visual representation of the diverse media landscape covering the unfolding drama. Major television networks dispatched their top anchors to report live from the ground, adding gravitas to the coverage and signaling the significance of the event. These seasoned journalists, microphones in hand and cameramen in tow, navigated the tumultuous crowd, seeking out compelling stories and memorable sound bites that would captivate their audiences. The coverage was not limited to traditional media outlets. A new generation of citizen journalists, armed with smartphones and social media accounts, provided raw, unfiltered perspectives from within the crowd. Their live streams and real-time updates offered an intimate, ground-level view of the protest, often capturing moments that might have been missed by mainstream media. As the story unfolded, it quickly dominated the 24-hour news cycle. Cable news channels featured split-screen coverage, juxtaposing live footage from the protest with panels of political commentators analyzing the significance of the event. The constant stream of updates and analysis created a feedback loop, drawing even more attention to the protest and potentially influencing its course. Social media platforms became battlegrounds of public opinion. Hashtags related to the protest trended globally, with supporters and critics of the demonstration engaging in heated online debates. Memes, video clips, and first-hand accounts spread virally, shaping the narrative in real time and often outpacing traditional media in terms of speed and reach. The international media also took notice, with foreign correspondents providing coverage for audiences around the world. Their outsider perspective often highlighted aspects of the event that domestic media might have overlooked, offering a broader context for the protests within the global political landscape. As public attention intensified, politicians and public figures felt compelled to weigh in on the unfolding events. Statements of support or condemnation flooded social media and news outlets, further fueling the national conversation and raising the stakes of the confrontation. The media's presence had a tangible impact on the protest itself. Some demonstrators, aware of the cameras, amplified their actions for maximum visual impact. Others sought out reporters, eager to share their stories and motivations with a wider audience. This symbiotic relationship between the media and the protesters added another layer of complexity to the unfolding narrative. However, the intense media scrutiny also brought challenges. Some critics accused certain outlets of sensationalizing the event, focusing on isolated incidents of conflict rather than providing a balanced overview of the protest. Others raised concerns about the potential for media coverage to escalate tensions, with the presence of cameras potentially encouraging more dramatic or confrontational behavior. As the coverage continued, media organizations grappled with ethical questions about their role in the unfolding events. Decisions about what to broadcast, which voices to amplify, and how to frame the narrative carried significant weight, potentially influencing public opinion and the ultimate outcome of the protest. The sheer volume of coverage also presented challenges for consumers of news. With so many sources providing real-time updates, it became increasingly difficult for the public to distinguish fact from rumor or to gain a comprehensive understanding of the situation. This information overload led some to retreat to their preferred echo chambers, while others struggled to piece together a coherent narrative from the fragmented reports. As Trump's arrival drew nearer, the media coverage reached a fever pitch. Speculation about potential outcomes and worst-case scenarios dominated the airwaves. Would the protests remain peaceful? How would law enforcement respond if things got out of hand? What impact would this confrontation have on Trump's presidency and the broader political landscape? In this charged atmosphere, every development, no matter how small, was scrutinized and amplified. The media's lens became a powerful force, shaping perceptions and potentially influencing the actions of both protesters and authorities. As the world watched and waited, the protest against Trump's arrival had become more than just a local event. It was now a defining moment in the ongoing national debate about his presidency and the future of American democracy. Now that we have explored the escalating tensions surrounding Trump's arrival, including the extensive security measures, the passionate reactions of protesters, and the intense media coverage, we'll next examine the unexpected twist that occurred when a group of bikers suddenly entered the scene, dramatically altering the dynamics of this highly charged situation. As tensions were escalating at the protest scene, an unexpected group of individuals roared onto the scene, catching everyone off guard. These newcomers were not your typical protesters or counter-protesters. They were bikers, But who exactly were these leather-clad, motorcycle-riding individuals who suddenly appeared? The group that arrived was identified as a coalition of various motorcycle clubs and organizations, primarily composed of veterans, law enforcement officers, and patriotic civilians. Among them were members of well-known groups such as Bikers for Trump and American Legion Riders, as well as local motorcycle clubs from the surrounding areas. These bikers represented a diverse cross-section of American society, united by their love for motorcycles and their strong support for then-President Donald Trump. Many of them were veterans who had served in various branches of the U.S. military, bringing with them a sense of duty and patriotism that would soon become evident in their actions. The bikers' backgrounds varied widely, from small business owners and blue-collar workers to professionals and retirees. What they shared was a common belief in protecting freedom of speech and the right to peaceful assembly, even for those with whom they might disagree politically. It's important to note that these bikers were not officially affiliated with Trump's campaign or any government organization. They were private citizens who had chosen to come together in support of the president and to ensure that his right to speak and the rights of his supporters to gather peacefully were protected. The arrival of the bikers was nothing short of dramatic. One moment, the protest scene was filled with the usual mix of demonstrators, counter-protesters, and law enforcement. The next, the air was filled with the thunderous roar of motorcycle engines as dozens, then hundreds of bikers began to pour into the area. The sheer number of bikers was staggering. Initial estimates put their numbers at around 500, but as more continued to arrive, it became clear that the group was much larger. By the time they had all assembled, eyewitnesses reported seeing upwards of 2,000 bikers, creating a sea of leather jackets, bandanas, and gleaming motorcycles that stretched as far as the eye could see. Their appearance was not just sudden, it was well coordinated. The bikers seemed to converge on the scene from multiple directions simultaneously, suggesting a level of organization and planning that took both the protesters and law enforcement by surprise. This wasn't a random gathering. It was a deliberate show of force and support. The timing of their arrival was also noteworthy. They appeared just as tensions between protesters and Trump supporters were reaching a boiling point, and concerns about potential violence were growing. Their presence immediately altered the dynamics of the situation, creating a new and unexpected element that all parties had to contend with. The bikers' numbers were not just impressive in terms of quantity, but also in terms of the visual and auditory impact they created. The rumble of thousands of motorcycle engines created a constant background noise that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. The sight of so many bikes and riders, many adorned with American flags and pro-Trump banners, created a striking visual spectacle that was impossible to ignore. The sudden appearance of such a large group of bikers elicited a wide range of reactions from those already present at the scene. The initial response was one of shock and awe, as both protesters and onlookers struggled to comprehend the sudden influx of these new participants. Among the anti-Trump protesters, there was an immediate sense of unease and apprehension. Many were visibly intimidated by the sheer numbers and imposing presence of the bikers. Some protesters began to back away, creating a noticeable gap between themselves and the newly arrived bikers. Others stood their ground but appeared visibly tense, unsure of what the bikers' intentions might be. There were also those among the protesters who reacted with defiance. Some began chanting louder, as if to reassert their presence and purpose in the face of this new challenge. A few bolder individuals even attempted to engage with the bikers verbally, shouting questions or accusations about their motives for being there. On the other hand, Trump supporters who were already present at the scene generally reacted with enthusiasm and relief. Many cheered and applauded as the bikers arrived, seeing them as reinforcements in their support for the president. Some even rushed to greet the bikers, shaking hands and exchanging words of encouragement. Onlookers and members of the media present at the scene displayed a mix of fascination and concern. Journalists scrambled to capture footage and interviews, recognizing that this unexpected development was a significant twist in the unfolding story. Some bystanders who had gathered to watch the protests out of curiosity now found themselves captivated by this new group, with many pulling out their phones to record the spectacle. Local law enforcement, caught off guard by the bikers' sudden appearance, initially appeared uncertain about how to respond. Their body language suggested a heightened state of alert as they quickly assessed whether this new group posed a threat to public safety or if they might actually help maintain order. As the initial shock wore off, a palpable tension settled over the entire scene. Both protesters and counter-protesters seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see what these bikers would do next. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of anticipation, anxiety, and curiosity. Interestingly, some individuals from both sides of the protest began to cautiously approach the bikers, attempting to engage in dialogue. These interactions ranged from heated exchanges to more measured conversations, as people tried to understand the bikers' intentions and stance. The reactions of local residents and businesses in the immediate vicinity were also notable. Some shop owners nervously eyed the growing crowd, concerned about potential property damage if the situation escalated. Others, however, seemed to welcome the bikers, with a few establishments even offering them water or use of their facilities. As news of the bikers' arrival spread through social media and local news outlets, more people began to converge on the scene, drawn by the spectacle and the potential for dramatic developments. This influx of curious onlookers further complicated the already complex dynamics at play. Throughout all of this, the bikers themselves maintained a disciplined and organized presence. They did not immediately engage in confrontations or provocative behavior, instead forming a loose perimeter around the area where Trump was expected to speak. This measured approach seemed to catch many off guard, challenging preconceived notions about how such a group might behave in this situation. As the initial shock of their arrival began to wear off, attention turned to what these bikers might do next. Would they serve as a peacekeeping force, or would their presence escalate tensions further? The atmosphere was thick with uncertainty as all eyes remained fixed on this unexpected group of new arrivals. The scene was now set for what would prove to be a pivotal moment in the unfolding events of the day. The arrival of the bikers had fundamentally altered the dynamics of the protest, creating a new and unpredictable element that would shape everything that followed. As the dust settled from their dramatic entrance, everyone present, protesters, supporters, law enforcement, and onlookers alike, waited with bated breath to see what would happen next. Now that we have explored the sudden appearance of the bikers and the initial reactions they provoked, we'll delve into the unthinkable action they took next, which would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved in this tense standoff. As the tension between protesters and Trump supporters reached a fever pitch, the unexpected arrival of the bikers brought an entirely new dynamic to the scene. Contrary to what many might have anticipated, the bikers' intervention was not one of aggression or confrontation. Instead, they took a series of actions that caught everyone off guard and ultimately changed the course of events. First and foremost, the bikers formed a human chain. This wasn't a barrier to push back protesters or create more conflict. Instead, it served as a neutral zone between the two opposing groups. The bikers, many of whom were veterans, positioned themselves strategically to create a buffer that would prevent direct clashes between Trump supporters and protesters. This human chain was more than just a physical barrier. The bikers used their imposing presence not to intimidate, but to de-escalate the situation. They engaged in dialogue with both sides, listening to concerns and grievances while maintaining a calm and neutral stance. Their approach was one of mediation rather than confrontation, which was unexpected given the stereotypes often associated with biker groups. In addition to forming the human chain, the bikers took it upon themselves to ensure the safety of all parties involved. They actively worked to identify and isolate individuals from both sides who seemed intent on causing trouble or inciting violence. By doing so, they effectively neutralized potential flashpoints that could have led to a dangerous escalation. Perhaps most surprisingly, the bikers initiated impromptu discussions between select representatives from both the pro-Trump and anti-Trump camps. They created small, controlled environments where individuals from opposing sides could engage in civil discourse. This unexpected move fostered an atmosphere of dialogue amidst what had previously been a scene of shouting and potential violence. The bikers also took practical steps to address immediate concerns. They distributed water to both protesters and Trump supporters, recognizing that the heated atmosphere and potential for prolonged confrontation could lead to dehydration. This simple act of kindness served to humanize all parties involved and subtly reminded everyone of their shared basic needs. Furthermore, the bikers coordinated with local law enforcement, acting as an auxiliary peacekeeping force. They shared information about potential trouble spots and worked in tandem with police to maintain order. This collaboration demonstrated a level of organization and civic responsibility that many observers found surprising. In a particularly poignant moment, several bikers removed their jackets, revealing t-shirts with messages promoting unity and peaceful dialogue. This symbolic gesture sent a powerful message about the importance of finding common ground. Even in the face of deep political divisions, the bikers also took steps to document the events unfolding around them. Many used their phones to record interactions, not for the purpose of sharing on social media, but to create an objective record of events. This action served two purposes. It encouraged better behavior from all parties, knowing they were being recorded, and it provided a means of accountability should any incidents occur. Throughout their intervention, the bikers maintained a strict policy of nonviolence. They made it clear that their presence was not to support or oppose any political stance, but to ensure the safety and rights of all Americans to express their views peacefully. This neutral stance was crucial in gaining the trust of both sides and allowing the bikers to effectively mediate the situation. In an unexpected move, some of the bikers even organized an impromptu voter registration drive. They emphasized the importance of civic engagement and encouraged both supporters and protesters to channel their passion into the democratic process. This action underscored the bikers' commitment to American democratic values, transcending the immediate political conflict. The bikers' unconventional intervention had an immediate and profound impact on the protest scene. The atmosphere, which had been charged with hostility and the potential for violence, underwent a remarkable transformation. First and foremost, the physical dynamics of the protest changed dramatically. The clear demarcation created by the bikers' human chain effectively separated the two opposing groups, significantly reducing the likelihood of direct confrontations. This physical barrier created a sense of order and structure that had been lacking in the chaotic environment. The tension in the air, which had been palpable just moments before, began to dissipate. The unexpected nature of the bikers' actions caught both protesters and Trump supporters off guard, momentarily breaking the cycle of antagonism that had been building. This pause allowed for a collective breath, a moment of reflection that proved crucial in changing the tenor of the event. Perhaps most significantly, the bikers' neutral stance and efforts at mediation opened up channels of communication that had previously seemed impossible. Small groups of protesters and Trump supporters, under the watchful eyes of the bikers, began engaging in actual conversations rather than shouting matches. While these dialogues didn't lead to immediate agreement on political issues, they fostered a sense of shared humanity that had been absent in the heated confrontations. The presence of the bikers also had a calming effect on the more aggressive elements within both camps. Those who had come spoiling for a fight found themselves face to face with individuals who refused to be provoked and instead responded with calm authority. This de-escalation technique proved highly effective in neutralizing potential troublemakers. Moreover, the bikers' actions seemed to awaken a sense of shame or self-reflection in some of the more confrontational protesters and supporters. Seeing these unexpected peacemakers stepping in to protect the rights of all participants led some individuals to reconsider their aggressive stances. The impromptu voter registration drive organized by some of the bikers had an interesting effect on the protest dynamics. It redirected some of the energy from confrontation to civic engagement. Both Trump supporters and protesters found themselves standing side by side, filling out voter registration forms, creating surreal moments of cooperation amidst the broader conflict. The atmosphere of the protest also shifted as media attention began to focus on the bikers' unexpected intervention. Journalists on the scene, who had been preparing to cover potential violence, instead found themselves reporting on this unusual peacekeeping effort. This shift in narrative had a ripple effect, influencing how both protesters and supporters perceived the event and their roles within it. Another immediate impact was a reduction in the workload and stress on local law enforcement. The bikers' efforts to maintain peace and their coordination with police allowed the officers to focus on specific areas of concern rather than trying to manage the entire volatile situation. This more targeted approach to security further contributed to the overall de-escalation. The bikers' distribution of water and other basic supplies had an unexpectedly humanizing effect on the protest. The simple act of sharing resources served as a reminder of shared needs and humanity, cutting through the political divisions. In some cases, this led to small acts of kindness between opposing sides, further softening the hostile atmosphere. As news of the bikers' intervention spread through social media and word of mouth, the nature of the crowd began to change. Some of the more aggressive elements on both sides began to leave, realizing that the opportunity for confrontation had diminished. At the same time, more curious and peacefully inclined individuals were drawn to the scene, intrigued by reports of this unexpected turn of events. The protest, which had been characterized by loud chants and angry shouting, took on a different auditory quality. The volume decreased and the sound of actual conversations began to be heard. This acoustic shift was symbolic of the broader change in the nature of the gathering. Lastly, the bikers' presence and actions served as a powerful reminder of the complexity of American society and the danger of stereotyping. Many observers were forced to confront their preconceptions about both bikers and the nature of political protests. This cognitive dissonance led to moments of reflection and reconsideration that had an immediate impact on how individuals were interacting with those they perceived as opponents. The unexpected intervention by the bikers and its immediate impact on the protest scene elicited a range of reactions from Trump's team and security personnel. Their responses evolved as the situation unfolded, reflecting the unpredictable nature of the events. Initially, Trump's security team viewed the arrival of the bikers with considerable alarm. The sudden appearance of a large group of motorcyclists at an already volatile political event set off immediate red flags. Security protocols were quickly reviewed and adjusted to account for this new and potentially dangerous element. However, as it became clear that the bikers were acting as peacekeepers rather than agitators, the security team's stance began to shift. They moved from a position of high alert to one of cautious observation. The head of Trump's security detail reportedly made direct contact with leaders of the biker group to better understand their intentions and coordinate efforts. Trump's campaign manager was among the first of his team to recognize the potential positive impact of the bikers' intervention. Seeing the de-escalation of tensions and the creation of a more controlled environment, the campaign manager quickly briefed Trump on the developing situation. This briefing reportedly included a recommendation to acknowledge and possibly even commend the bikers' actions in any forthcoming statements. The president's social media team, always alert to opportunities for positive messaging, began drafting potential tweets that would frame the bikers' intervention in a light favorable to Trump. However, they held off on posting anything immediately, waiting for a clearer picture of the situation to emerge and for approval from higher-ups in the campaign. Trump's press secretary, caught off guard by the unexpected turn of events, scrambled to prepare a statement. The initial draft reportedly focused on praising the bikers for protecting free speech and maintaining order, while also emphasizing Trump's support for law enforcement and peaceful assembly. This statement underwent several revisions as the situation continued to evolve. Interestingly, some members of Trump's team saw the bikers' intervention as a potential campaign opportunity. They began discussing ways to incorporate this event into future rallies and campaign narratives, seeing it as a powerful symbol of grassroots support and American unity, transcending political divisions. The president's legal team, always mindful of potential liabilities, closely monitored the situation. They were particularly interested in how the bikers' actions might intersect with local laws and regulations regarding protests and crowd control. Their initial concern about potential legal complications gave way to cautious optimism as it became clear that the bikers were effectively reducing the risk of violent incidents. Trump's policy advisors had a mixed reaction to the events. Some saw the bikers' intervention as a distraction from the campaign's core messages, while others recognized it as an opportunity to emphasize themes of law and order, civic responsibility, and national unity. This led to some behind-the-scenes debates about how to best frame the event in terms of Trump's broader political narrative. The reaction from Trump's security detail on the ground was perhaps the most immediately visible. After initial moments of heightened alert, they began to work in loose coordination with the bikers. While maintaining their primary focus on the president's safety, they adjusted their positioning and tactics to complement the bikers' peacekeeping efforts. This adaptive approach helped to further stabilize the overall security situation. Some of Trump's more populist-leaning advisors saw the bikers' actions as a perfect embodiment of their political philosophy. They began pushing for Trump to meet with representatives of the biker group, seeing it as a powerful photo opportunity and a chance to connect with a demographic often stereotyped and misunderstood by the mainstream media. The president's speechwriting team, always on the lookout for compelling material, began crafting passages that could be incorporated into future speeches. They saw the bikers' intervention as a powerful anecdote that could illustrate themes of American resilience, unexpected alliances, and the power of civic engagement. Trump's liaison with local law enforcement reported a generally positive reception to the bikers' actions from police on the scene. This information was quickly relayed up the chain of command, further influencing the campaign's evolving stance on the situation. As the immediate crisis began to subside, Trump's strategic planning team started to analyze the potential long-term implications of this event. They discussed how it might affect public perception, media narratives, and even voter sentiment in key demographics. This analysis would later inform campaign strategies and messaging in the days and weeks following the event. Finally, it's worth noting that not all reactions from Trump's team were made public immediately. Many of the discussions and decisions happened behind closed doors, with the campaign carefully controlling the flow of information to the media. The full extent of their reactions and the strategic decisions made in response to the bikers' intervention would only become clear in the subsequent days and weeks as the campaign's official narrative about the event took shape. The unexpected intervention of bikers during the Trump protest marked a significant turning point in the dynamics of political demonstrations. This event reshaped the landscape of public gatherings and sparked a series of changes in how protests are organized, conducted, and perceived. One of the most notable shifts was the increased emphasis on security measures at political events. Organizers began to anticipate potential counter-protests or interventions from unexpected groups, leading to more comprehensive planning and coordination with local law enforcement. This heightened awareness resulted in stricter crowd control measures, designated areas for different groups, and improved communication systems between event organizers and security personnel. The incident also led to a reevaluation of protest strategies among activist groups. Many organizations recognized the need for better preparation and contingency plans to handle unforeseen circumstances. This included training sessions for protesters on de-escalation techniques and peaceful resistance in the face of potential confrontations. Furthermore, the biker intervention highlighted the power of spontaneous counter-demonstrations. This realization prompted both pro-Trump and anti-Trump groups to develop rapid response networks, allowing them to mobilize supporters quickly in case of similar situations in the future. Social media platforms became crucial tools for organizing these impromptu gatherings, with dedicated channels and hashtags used to coordinate efforts. The event also sparked discussions about the role of non-traditional actors in political demonstrations. The bikers' actions demonstrated that groups not typically associated with political activism could have a significant impact on protest outcomes. This led to increased outreach efforts by various political campaigns and activist organizations to engage with a broader range of communities and interest groups. Another significant change was the shift in protest tactics. Many groups began to prioritize non-confrontational approaches, recognizing that escalating tensions could lead to unpredictable and potentially dangerous situations. This resulted in a rise in creative and peaceful forms of protest, such as silent demonstrations, art installations, and digital activism. The incident also influenced the way law enforcement agencies approach crowd management during political events. Many departments revised their training protocols and operational procedures to better handle complex scenarios involving multiple groups with conflicting interests. This included enhanced coordination between local, state, and federal agencies to ensure a more cohesive response to large-scale demonstrations. The bikers' intervention during the Trump protests generated a wide range of reactions from the public and media, sparking intense debates across various platforms. The incident quickly became a focal point for discussions about free speech, the right to protest, and the role of citizen intervention in political demonstrations. Initially, social media platforms were flooded with eyewitness accounts, videos, and photos of the event, leading to a rapid spread of information and misinformation. This digital deluge prompted many news organizations to fact-check and verify information before reporting, highlighting the challenges of real-time news coverage in the age of social media. Mainstream media outlets provided extensive coverage of the incident, with many featuring interviews with protesters, bikers, and law enforcement officials. The diversity of perspectives presented in these reports contributed to a more nuanced understanding of the event and its implications. However, it also revealed the deeply polarized nature of the American political landscape, as different news outlets framed the story in ways that often align with their perceived political leanings. Public opinion was sharply divided. Supporters of the bikers' actions praised them for what they saw as a patriotic defense of free speech and protection of a political figure. They argued that the bikers had prevented potential violence and ensured that the event could proceed as planned. Social media hashtags like #BikersForTrump and #PatrioticBikers gained traction among these supporters. On the other hand, critics condemned the bikers' intervention as an intimidation tactic that infringed upon the protesters' right to peaceful assembly. They argued that the presence of the bikers escalated tensions and could have led to violence. Hashtags such as #ProtestRights and #DefendDemocracy circulated among those who opposed the bikers' actions. The incident also sparked broader discussions about civility in political discourse and the limits of protest. Many commentators and public figures called for a return to more respectful and constructive forms of political engagement, emphasizing the importance of dialogue over confrontation. Media coverage extended beyond the immediate event, with many outlets producing in-depth analyses and feature stories exploring the cultural and sociological aspects of the biker intervention. These pieces examine topics such as the history of biker culture in America, the evolving nature of political activism, and the intersection of various subcultures with mainstream politics. The event also attracted international media attention, with news organizations from around the world reporting on the incident. This global coverage often framed the story within the context of broader trends in American politics and society, contributing to discussions about the state of democracy and civil liberties in the United States. Social scientists and political analysts weighed in on the implications of the event, offering insights into the changing dynamics of political participation and the role of non-traditional actors in shaping public discourse. Many pointed to the incident as a reflection of the deepening divisions within American society and the increasing polarization of political views. The media response also highlighted the power of visual storytelling in shaping public perception. Iconic images from the event, such as bikers standing alongside protesters or facing off against them, became widely circulated and often symbolized the complex tensions at play. These images sparked discussions about the role of photojournalism in capturing and framing political events. The unexpected intervention of bikers at the Trump protests had significant legal and political ramifications, prompting a thorough examination of existing laws and policies related to public gatherings and political demonstrations. From a legal standpoint, The incident raised complex questions about the boundaries of free speech and the right to assembly. Constitutional law experts weighed in on the legality of the bikers' actions, debating whether their presence constituted protected speech or if it crossed a line into intimidation or obstruction. This led to calls for clearer guidelines on the rights and responsibilities of counter-protesters and the role of citizen intervention in public demonstrations. The event also sparked discussions about the adequacy of existing crowd control laws and regulations. Many legal scholars argued that current statutes were ill-equipped to handle situations involving multiple groups with conflicting interests converging at a single event. This realization prompted lawmakers in several states to propose new legislation aimed at balancing the rights of protesters, counter-protesters, and public safety concerns. One of the key legal debates centered around the concept of heckler's veto, the idea that the government might restrict speech out of fear that it will provoke violent reactions from opponents. The bikers' intervention raised questions about whether their actions constituted a form of heckler's veto or if they were exercising their own right to free expression. This debate led to renewed interest in landmark Supreme Court cases dealing with free speech in public forums. The incident also had implications for law enforcement agencies and their protocols for handling protests. Many police departments face scrutiny over their response to the situation, with critics arguing that they should have done more to separate the opposing groups. This led to a review of police tactics and training procedures, with some departments implementing new guidelines for managing complex protest scenarios. On the political front, the biker intervention became a lightning rod for partisan debates. Politicians from across the political spectrum weighed in on the incident, often using it to reinforce their existing positions on issues such as law and order, freedom of speech, and the role of government in regulating public gatherings. For supporters of then-President Trump, the bikers' actions were framed as a patriotic defense of free speech and a demonstration of grassroots support for the administration. Many Republican politicians praised the bikers, arguing that they had prevented potential violence and ensured that the event could proceed as planned. This narrative resonated with Trump's base and was used to bolster claims about the enthusiasm of his supporters. On the other hand, Democratic politicians and Trump critics denounced the bikers' intervention as an act of intimidation that threatened the fundamental right to peaceful protest. They argued that the incident was symptomatic of a broader trend of increasing hostility towards dissent and called for stronger protections for protesters. This perspective aligned with ongoing debates about civil liberties and the state of democracy under the Trump administration. The event also had implications for future political campaigns and rallies. Many candidates and party organizations began to reassess their security protocols and engagement strategies with various community groups. There was a growing recognition of the need to anticipate and prepare for potential clashes between supporters and opponents at political events. Furthermore, the incident influenced policy discussions at various levels of government. Local and state officials grappled with questions about how to balance public safety concerns with the protection of First Amendment rights. This led to debates about the appropriate use of public spaces for political demonstrations and the allocation of resources for managing large-scale events. The political fallout from the biker intervention extended to discussions about polarization and the need for civil dialogue. Many moderate politicians and public figures used the incident as a call to action, urging for a return to more respectful and constructive forms of political engagement. This led to initiatives aimed at promoting bipartisanship and reducing the toxicity of political discourse. The biker intervention at the Trump protest had far-reaching consequences that continue to shape the landscape of political demonstrations and civic engagement in the United States. These long-term effects have influenced various aspects of protest culture, public policy, and social dynamics. One of the most significant long-term impacts has been the evolution of protest strategies and tactics. Activist groups across the political spectrum have adapted their approaches in light of the lessons learned from the biker incident. There has been a noticeable shift towards more organized and strategically planned demonstrations, with increased emphasis on coordination and communication among participants. Many organizations have invested in training programs for their members, focusing on de-escalation techniques, legal rights, and effective communication with law enforcement. This professionalization of protest movements has led to more disciplined and focused demonstrations, potentially reducing the likelihood of spontaneous confrontations or violence. The incident also catalyzed the development of new technologies and tools for protest organization and management. Mobile apps and digital platforms designed specifically for coordinating large-scale demonstrations have gained popularity. These tools often include features such as real-time mapping, secure communication channels, and legal resources, enabling protesters to respond more effectively to changing situations on the ground. Another long-term effect has been the increased involvement of diverse groups in political activism. The biker intervention demonstrated that non-traditional actors could play significant roles in shaping political events. This realization has led to greater outreach efforts by both established activist organizations and political campaigns to engage with a wider range of communities and interest groups. The incident has also had a lasting impact on public perception of protests and their role in democratic society. There is a growing recognition of the complexity of modern demonstrations, which often involve multiple groups with conflicting interests. This has led to more nuanced media coverage and public discussions about the nature of free speech and the boundaries of acceptable protest behavior. In response to the challenges highlighted by the biker incident, many cities and states have revised their policies regarding public gatherings and demonstrations. These changes often include more detailed permitting processes, clearer guidelines for the use of public spaces, and enhanced coordination between event organizers and local authorities. While these measures aim to improve public safety and reduce the potential for conflicts, they have also raised concerns about potential restrictions on the right to protest. The long-term effects extend to the realm of civil liberties and constitutional law. Legal scholars and courts continue to grapple with questions raised by the incident, particularly regarding the balance between free speech rights and public safety concerns. This ongoing legal discourse has the potential to shape future interpretations of the First Amendment and its application to public demonstrations. The biker intervention has also influenced the way political campaigns approach rallies and public events. There is now greater attention paid to the potential for counter-demonstrations and the need for comprehensive security planning. Many campaigns have adopted more sophisticated crowd management techniques and have become more selective about venue choices to minimize the risk of confrontations. From a sociological perspective, the incident has contributed to ongoing discussions about polarization in American society. It has become a case study in the examination of how different groups perceive and respond to political events, highlighting the deep divisions that exist within the country. This has led to increased academic interest in studying the dynamics of political protests and their impact on social cohesion. The long-term effects are also evident in the realm of civic education. Many schools and universities have incorporated lessons from the biker incident into their curricula on civil rights, political science, and social studies. This has helped to foster a more informed and engaged citizenry, with a deeper understanding of the complexities surrounding political demonstrations and the importance of civic participation. Moreover, the incident has had a lasting impact on the relationship between law enforcement agencies and protest groups. Many police departments have revised their training programs and operational procedures to better handle complex protest scenarios. There is a growing emphasis on community policing approaches and proactive engagement with activist groups to build trust and improve communication. The long-term effects of the biker intervention extend to the international sphere as well. The incident has been studied by governments and activist groups around the world, influencing global approaches to managing political demonstrations. It has contributed to ongoing international discussions about the role of civil society in democratic processes and the challenges of maintaining public order while respecting fundamental rights. As we move forward, the legacy of the biker intervention continues to shape the evolving landscape of political activism and public demonstrations in the United States. Its impact serves as a reminder of the complex interplay between free speech, public safety, and democratic participation, underscoring the ongoing need for dialogue, understanding, and adaptation in a rapidly changing political environment. The clash between protesters and supporters during Trump's arrival created a tense atmosphere, threatening to escalate into a dangerous situation. However, the unexpected appearance of bikers completely changed the dynamic. Their intervention, while surprising to many, managed to defuse the tension and prevent potential violence. This incident serves as a reminder that peaceful resolution can come from unexpected sources. It highlights the importance of open dialogue and understanding between opposing groups, even in highly charged political situations. If you like this story, we have plenty more that will touch your heart. Click the screen